I do a lot of counseling, about 20 sessions a week, and I've often counseled people who are suicidal. When I have people who are suicidal who do not believe in a God, I can't help them. Neither can the psychiatric ward. When they believe in a God, then you can make it practical for them as to how they can then, in teaming up with God, make it work. And so I just feel that we owe it to our children to understand those kind of things. Because when we look at the creation around us and we look at our country and the forefathers, I'm a bit of a history buff, and when I did a little study there, I noticed that our whole law court system is based on Christian values. And we still have a Bible in every courtroom in the country, right to the Northwest Territories. And so if we go to the courtroom and vouch for something that's true, then we need to put our hand on the Bible and declare that we'll speak only the truth. And so I still think our children deserve to know a little bit where that all came from. But where you sort it out and how you sort it out, that is entirely your business, because I don't think we can push those kind of things on each other at all. But I just find it very helpful if I can tell a person, you're not the end of the rope. You're not the end, you're not the be-all and the end-all. There's lots of other stuff around us. So that's my little introduction for that. With what's inside your child's head today, and we want to give a little bit of an overview as to why we might want to come to these parenting sessions, how emotions can trap us, how they can trap our children, and if we're all trapped, it's a bit of a trap situation. So we want to see if we can get out of that trap and avoid the trap and so forth. I want to talk about how being a good parent, in quotation marks, may be a bad thing. We want to talk about building your children's self-respect. And we want to talk a lot about praise and encouragement and how they're different, and how certain attitudes that we as parents foster and certain ways that we have, how they will encourage children to do what is right. Do you really hear your children? And want to deal a lot with listening skills. So those are the things that we want to do this round. Not so long ago, I spoke to a group of people that were out there for the summer to work with mentally challenged people at camps. And the same basics that I'm going to share with you here these 4 nights, plus the other years, the same basics apply that apply to the regular people who don't have those handicaps or those those challenges. And I said, they're so basic to what we need to do. I always think, and I say it almost every time I start a session here, that it's a little bit like this story has it for us. Here are the hen and the pig having a wonderful spring day, and a big transport drives by on the highway with a bacon and egg advertisement on the side. Hen cocks her head, says, "Wow, am I proud to be a participant of that breakfast." And the pig grunts and says, "Yes, for you it is participation, but for me it's total commitment." Parents and teachers, anyone who works with young people, it's total commitment or else it fails. That's how it seems. And so we want to take that premise on us and work with that as carefully as we can. I also believe that there are a few little basics that we need to be very much attuned to when it comes to parenting. I grew up in a family of 14. I'm the 3rd oldest. I had an older sister, an older brother. And I had a dad who kept his cool. I cannot ever remember that my dad lost it, except once. That was when Daisy, our wonderful milking cow, stepped into Dad's full pail of milk. And in those days, when you have 14 kids, we couldn't afford the car seats I see walking in and the cradles and all that, None of that. We had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to keep bread and butter on that table. And it was an 8-foot table, by the way. And I also noticed that when she had stepped into that pail, a stainless steel pail, that we wouldn't be able to afford one right away. It would take a while, so we'd have to have the old aluminum again. But Dad thought he was alone in the barn, and he gave Daisy the flat of his hand against her ribs 7 times. I counted. I was a preschool kid, just able to count, And when he turned around, he suddenly said, "Oh, you're there too." And then he said, "I think that Daisy didn't notice that I respect a creator, that I respect God." And so he got a little bit of chop and gave Daisy some chop. Just to make up, I guess, you know. Or maybe to teach his son a lesson. And he said two smacks in the ribs would have been just right, not 7. And that's the only time I can remember that he lost, that he was angry. But you know, he somehow got from his children what he wanted. And I guess, you know, we have to learn to know who our children are. What's inside my head? Do you and your spouse, if you have a spouse, sit down sometimes and just kind of explore, what do we want from our children? Where do we want them to be in 5 years from now? Or even, if that's too long range, 1 year from now. If that doesn't hit the surface, can we explore the next month, maybe? And I think that we need to ask those kind of questions quite often. Because if we don't, then we may miss the mark. If we aim at nothing, it's like, I can remember taking bow and arrow lessons. And our teacher said, if you aim at nothing, you're sure to hit it. That's the way it works in life too. If you aim at nothing, you're always going to hit the target, you know. But the target is so wide, it means nothing. So our children want to know a little bit about that. To teach our children how to plan ahead, you may want to turn your clock back for them. Tell them stories of the yesteryears. I think it's so important that we have some of that going on. And so often the children will ask questions, and we may have a little bit of a hard time answering those because we weren't always angels when we were kids, were we? I wish where we could just once a week, you know, fill our kids with the right kind of material. Because listen, folks, I cannot do and say anything unless it's first in our heads. And so we can literally control who we are. We can help our kids control who they are by what we stick into their heads and into our heads. And so if that really measures up, if we can understand that, then we would just say, then it's important what we allow into their minds. Now, I think most of us are moving away from the point of having our TV set as a babysitter. It's very handy for the kids to be completely fascinated with a TV. But you know, research shows us that if you have more than 1 hour of that a day, we're already hurting a lot of stuff that's going on in the child's mind. I don't know whether you know what the human brain is all about. I was so curious that I decided to check with a neurologist to see how that worked. I said, please give it to me in layman's language. But he said that the human brain has very, very many layers. They're so thin that the thinnest material that you've ever felt or seen is still much thicker. And he said the miracle is this, that every single layer has its own separate supply of blood brought to it. That's why we neurologists mostly believe there must be a mastermind who's creating this kind of stuff. So I asked him, so how many layers do we have? And he said, one human brain, if you could separate the layers one from another and put them side by side like a jigsaw puzzle, one human brain covers the complete earth, every square centimeter. So when someone says to me, and I have youngsters say it to me often, I'm a nobody, I'm a pile of junk. I said, oh, wait a minute. And I tell him what his brain looks like. I said, and we've only talked about the upper 4 inches of your system. There's so much more. And I said, we become what we stick into our minds and into our stomachs. That's the total sum of who I am. Those two things. And so to evaluate what goes in to those two places is very, very useful for all parents to do. I don't know whether you, just to carry that one step further, do you realize that our heart gives approximately, or pumps approximately an equivalent of 10 train cars full every month and pushes it through 25,000 miles, that's once around the earth, of arteries and veins. You know, it's just a wonderful system. And so what we want to do is we want to teach our children all about that system, which will completely dispel the idea that I'm a nobody. No one is a nobody. We all need to respect one another for having a functioning brain. And I guess, you know, we have to learn to know who our children are. Let me give you an example. You know, he once told me on his deathbed that he had a bit of a struggle with my brother Reuben. Now, Reuben was the kind of fellow, he was very, you know, he always wanted to, he was mechanically minded, so he had to do things that would describe, you know, a mechanically minded person. Let's just take an example where he was going to fill or put the chop from one bin into the other. What happened? Well, he would first put a pulley system up there somehow, and that would take a lot of time. See, this was a half-hour job, and by the time 2 hours were gone, he had the pulleys up there. Rope and everything was there. And then he had to con his little brother into filling the pails on one side so that he could then, you know, pull them up and dump on the other side. And at first my dad said that he was irked by that. He thought that was a waste of time, until he said to himself, now wait a minute here. Maybe this young fellow, who's 10 today, he is preparing by doing that for real life. Maybe that's what he's going to do for the rest of his days. So I better recognize that. And so from now on, if he has a half-hour job that could have a prefabrication of pulleys and whatnot, that would take another 2 hours, then let me give him at least 3 hours so he can do the job. And Dad said, I was relaxed when that happened, and Reuben was relaxed. And he learned a mile a minute. What's Reuben doing today? Exactly that kind of stuff. Anything mechanically minded, he's on it.